But if you start to go in the right direction, as in it's like a huge great game of hot and cold, isn't it? That game we used to play when we were kids. Colder, colder, cold, hotter, hotter, hotter. So every time and these nudges and these numbers and these winks from the universe that we're talking about, you start to see these things and it's like, yes, yes, yeah, no, no, no.
The creation isn't happening then, and it isn't happening when. It's actually happening right now. It's happening. We could lose the house. We could lose it all. How are we going to survive? We'd be out on the streets. We might have to sell the kids. Debra, how are you?
Pretty excited for our conversation, actually, Dominic.
Yeah. I'm really been looking forward to this conversation because you and I had a conversation a few weeks ago, and both of us were pretty shocked at the reaction to this conversation. What a surprise. We recorded, asked some, about your story and what had happened and maybe we'll give a bit of that context. But the thing is, we had a conversation about that and you had this, realization. And then all of a sudden there's so many people who were watching that conversation and giving us feedback and reaching out and talking about how hopeful it was for them and all of that. It was that was incredible. And so maybe let's give a context about that conversation, what that was about and why we're talking again, what we decided when you
Oh, and obviously we will have to bring numbers into that. Not that either of us are number geeks or anything like that, but the number thing that you said when we just jumped on this conversation. It was just my story, basically, that I was in an incredibly unhealthy relationship. I never saw a way out of that. All I'd ever wanted to do growing up was be a mom and have children and be a really good mom. And it just felt to me like I had completely messed that up. I felt like I had damaged my children. And when I did get out of that relationship, that was pretty much what I was told by people. I had counseling and things, and we were pretty much told that that's how it was, that they were, always going to struggle because of what they had been through. And then I came across Sydney Banks and had this huge, just this moment of realization that just simply wasn't true, and that my children weren't broken and neither was I. And it's definitely been a journey. There's definitely been ups and downs in there. But since that realization, and that was why then when the conversation went a little bit crazy and plenty of people were watching it and clearly getting something from that and really hearing a massive message of hope in there, which my story, it really is. I see that for me, I see that I'm so impacted by what my children are doing out in the world and how they, what they see and what they do with their lives, and the impact this has had on me. It is a great story of hope. And then you say about the numbers that happened just
before we got because but we were watching this conversation and it's there on my channel. We should actually just note what the name of it is in case anyone wants to go back, because the way it was titled is "You're Always Okay, Never Broken, No Matter What Happened." So that conversation, you and I had that conversation, we posted it, and all of a sudden it was 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, the views of this thing were going, right? And then then we said, wow, this is nuts. And people are reaching out and people are seeing such hope in this. And so then we had this idea, well, maybe we should talk again and maybe talk about what happens from there. So before coming on this call, I thought I should just check, because I knew it was over 1,000 last time. So I should be checking so that when we come on, I'll let you know what it is. To my shock, the conversation had 1,111 views. And not that those numbers mean anything.
Nothing.
But in my mind, that those winks from the universe, 11111, like that, it was just kind of okay, good idea, you two should be having another conversation. You thought it was a good idea, but the universe is agreeing with that idea that we would have another conversation. So I thought that was a nice way that we start in here.
Absolutely, yeah. And I love that. I love those nudges. And that is very much, I can see, like, for all those years that I struggled, I never took any notice. Like, we're joking and laughing around, and fair enough, you know, whatever makes sense to people. But there are just so many, this whole path of least resistance that we're always on, the way that we are always guided, it is so obviously there. And part of the conversation that we said we wanted to talk about today was the hope for when we have a realization, when we begin to see something, when we have a moment. And, you know, all human beings have the ability, it's built in, and we have insights all the time. You know, once I realized what an insight was, I could look back and see many, many insights that I had over my life. So that is perfectly, we all do that all the time. But beginning to, you know, when we begin to, again, it's seeing that, isn't it? Seeing these nudges, seeing the insights, seeing the implications of that, and what opens up and what becomes possible when we start to. And I love the lightness and the joy in that. That is what I really love about this whole conversation, about this, the lightness and the joy. And that is definitely, like, with my children, like, oh, they're grown up and, you know, they're out in the world doing some things. I've got 2 amazing grandchildren, but it is watching them and watching how light-heartedly they take this and the things that they are doing with their lives, because they watch these little nudges and these things that we talk about. And it's amazing when we get a feel for that, I guess.
If we look at context again, because we're looking at where do you go from that in, or even like kind of what's happened from that insight, and then just the context again, how long ago was it that you had left that relationship? Because it was a bad relationship and went into a women's shelter, I think, in order to, as part of the exit. And how long ago was that?
So I left the relationship in 2009, and it was in 2011 that I had my insight.
Okay. So 14 years ago, you got out. And then there was a period prior to the insight where that period you were, I think what, as most people, is like, something bad has happened to you.
Yep.
This is trauma.
Yep.
This is trauma. You are now a traumatized person.
I was told that I had PTSD, and so my children were told the same, and my children were told that they would have to use coping mechanisms for the rest of their life to get over the night terrors and the trauma that they had been through. For
the rest of their lives. Okay, so that right is a broken, right? So something's happened, you got broken. What's broken will never be again what it was.
Yes.
And
pretty much the message we got, yes.
Right. And so you're going to have to live the rest of your life now broken, and we can help you to cope.
Yeah.
And to kind of at least get by, right?
Yeah.
But that's not what happened for you, because you said 2 years later, right? So that's the understanding. That's the understanding, right? Reasonable understanding. When something that bad happens to you, you're out of luck.
Yeah, pretty much.
You're out of luck. You're out of luck. Too bad for you, because you're now broken. We can help you to cope, but you'll be broken forever, right? But then 2 years later, something different happened. And that was, you said, an insight. Yeah, that was of all the strange things. I was cleaning holiday cottages at the time. I live in a beautiful place in North Devon in the UK, holiday destination. And I was cleaning holiday cottages to make ends meet. And I would just try and listen to anything positive, because I was really, really struggling to even like myself, because I believed that I had damaged my children. I believed that the fact that I hadn't protected them enough, and I hadn't left this relationship, that I was at least partly responsible for what had happened to them, and they were never going to be okay. And that was on me. That was my fault. So that was a heavy guilt, shame. Wow. Yeah. That's not easy to carry. So yeah, and so I just used to try and find things to listen to while I was cleaning, to try and feel a little bit better. And I'd come across Jamie Smart,
who he had not long come across. I think he'd done something with Michael Neal, I think, and he was looking towards the principles, and he just said he was just sharing this free thing to see whether people liked it or not. He was just kind of putting his toe in the water at the time. He wasn't really doing principle stuff, but he was just putting his toe in the water. And I just heard this. There was some Sydney Banks stuff that in there. There was a little bit from that, and I actually went back and listened to the recording, and I don't know if the words weren't there. I don't know, but something just, I heard within me that your children aren't broken. People can't be broken. Your children aren't broken, and neither are you. There is a way for all of you to be perfectly okay. And I was actually mopping the floor, and I actually fell on the floor and started to cry.
Oh, wow.
And sat on the floor for I don't even know how long I sat there. And then when I went home, I don't, even on the day, I sort of couldn't remember what happened. And then when I went home and I just kept saying to my children, you're not broken, you're absolutely fine. And they thought I'd lost the plot. And then it was kind of a bit of a journey. There wasn't much 3 principles stuff around then. There wasn't many people, there wasn't much to listen to, there wasn't much to find. And I actually had a recording that Aaron Turner had done about relationships. And I think it was about a 7 or 8 minute recording. And I listened to it on repeat, just listened and listened and listened and listened, just trying to glean what this was and how I could, talk about it, how I could share this with my children, basically. So yeah, that was interesting. And first of all, if I'm honest, I did try to force it on my children. And then I kind of had another realization that actually this has to be about me. I have to understand this, because I think at that point, I had this idea that my children weren't broken, that I could, I could save them maybe, there was something I could do for them. And I was still in this place of hating myself, but I had this thing that I could actually maybe save my children. And then at some point, I had a realization that actually the person that had to do this, the person that had to walk the talk, I had to go inside and see for myself that I wasn't broken, really see it and really live that. And as I did that and started to do that, that was when things really started to change for my children. That was when it was really like, what's going on, Mum? You're completely different.
Wow. I think we got to highlight this. So you're saying that first you tried to deal with your children from an insight of realizing that they were okay.
Yeah.
And then what you did was you realized, wait a minute, it's not them, it's I have to really see this. And all of a sudden, up until then, while you were trying to help them and trying to tell them about what you had seen, you weren't getting anywhere. And then all of a sudden you went back to you.
Yeah.
And then the more you started to be grounded and seeing the truth of what you had seen, suddenly they changed. They started to
they started to ask me questions. They started to say, what's going on here, because they saw me change so much. Because obviously pretty much the whole time they'd been brought up, I was completely lost in that relationship. I was just told what to do all the time, and they just, that's what they had seen. They hadn't seen me as a person in my own right who had any, who could do anything. And when the relationship ended, I was completely lost, because I had no idea how to do anything on my own, because I'd been in a relationship for well over 20 years. So I was completely, and then all of a sudden I was really turning this round and really beginning to, I was beginning to understand that I was creating this, and it was up to me what I created. And it was like, and it was really, really important to me. And I think that has been, I know when I speak to people and work with clients, one of the things, it's like, I don't know I don't remember having an insight about this. I don't remember how it happened. But that insight, that dawning on me that I have to do this first, that has been so instrumental in my story, I think. And I know, like, when I work with people and they will say, I need to help my mom, cousin, sister, friend, auntie, woman across, whatever it is, or they have this idea that this other person needs to be different so that they can be okay. And I think me realizing that actually just put all that aside and you do it. If you want your children to see something and you want them not to be broken, you show them how.
Wow.
And that kind of, that realization and that seeing and that coming back to, right, I am going to live this more than anyone else on this planet. I am going to live this. And that was definitely a decision that I made. And as I kind of stepped into that and did that, and I guess in a way it was almost like a sort of a bargain that I made with myself. Okay, you can stop hating yourself if you do this. If you really do this, you're kind of putting something back, if you like. And it really, really, really started to pay off. And that's kind of what I love in this, you know, what you share with the Abraham stuff that is so clearly, you know, that don't worry, if you keep going in the wrong direction, it'll just get worse. And equally, the flip side of that, but if you start to go in the right direction, as in it's like a huge, great game of hot and cold, isn't it? That game we used to play when we were kids, you know, hide something, colder, colder, cold, hotter, hotter, hotter. And it's exactly like that. So every time you're sort of, and these nudges and these numbers and these winks from the universe that we're talking about, you start to see these things and it's like, yes, yes, yeah, no, 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 yes, yes,
keep
yes.
going. Yeah, it's helping you to kind of keep going this way, keep going this way. This is where that health is. This is where that well-being is, where your well-being is over here. Right. And it was never lost. It's always over here. You just went over there where you couldn't.
You went way too far in that direction.
It's like looking over there, but it never went anywhere. It's still here. It's still here. Yeah. I think the thing you said there, and you can't even remember where, but it came as an insight where you saw that you had to work on yourself. This is so common. I think part of what prevents people is how selfish it seems. What do you mean? You're going to work on yourself? What about your kids? Aren't you going to help them? Like, what about, right? And sometimes when we're working with clients who are having struggles with this child, or they're very worried about the partner or the child because of what they're doing or saying. And it's like, it's so interesting because even in this understanding, it says, do you see that disturbance you have about them? Do you see the disturbance you have about them? That's a signal to you. You're the one with the disturbance. So when you're the one with the disturbance about them, every word out of your mouth is disturbed.
Yes.
It's a disturbed word. And so what your children would hear and what your partner would hear when you're disturbed is they would hear a disturbed person.
Absolutely. I've got a really good illustration of that, something that happened very, very recently. So my grandson is 4 and he starts school in September. And so he's been going into school for a couple of days to find out a bit about school. And he really isn't settling. He really doesn't like it. And my daughter was quite concerned about him and kind of like, oh, you know, I don't know what to do. He's really not settling. He really doesn't like this. He really doesn't, you know, it's not working. And so we actually had a conversation, and obviously I know my daughter very well and I know my daughter's history and what have you. And when my daughter when she was young, you know, very young and in primary school, she hated going into school, and she had this idea the whole time that I wasn't going to come and pick her up. And I was never late. I was not that parent. I never ever forgot my kids. I was never late or anything like that. So I was like, I never got it when she was going through that. I was like, I don't understand why you would think that I wouldn't come and pick you up. I don't know where you've got this idea from. But when this all happened with Zach, my grandson, what I really saw was at the time when my daughter was going to school, although exactly like you've just described, although I was saying all the right words to her, although I was saying, you know, go to school, school's fine, it's all good, I was in this relationship and my energy, my truth, who I was actually being really, you know, on an energetic level, was somebody who was terrified of being left, was somebody who was disturbed, somebody, so my energy, the real message she was getting was this whole fear of being left, fear that this wasn't going to work, fear, just fear, basically. Although those weren't the words that were coming out of my mouth. And that is so confusing, I think. I see that all the time, because we know what we need to say, but the words are actually the least bit of our communication. Who we are actually being at our core is what somebody truly hears. So even if you say the right words, they are disturbed words, it's disturbed sentences. And I know that my daughter was just going through something recently. I knew that she'd been, and I said, who are you actually being around your son? You're saying all these things, but who are you being? And it really hit her. She was really like, oh my gosh, yeah, I'm really anxious about this thing that's going on. And I'm taking him into school and going, it's all fine, there's no need to be anxious, there's no need to be anxious over anything, when actually inside I'm anxious. And
oh, wow.
Yeah, the school were planning to talk to him about it. And I said, the problem with that is he will likely come up with some reason. He maybe will say something like, oh, because I can't play with my train set when I'm at school and I love playing with my train set. So the school may then go all out and try and find some kind of train set or some kind of thing, and then he's just going to be more confused, because he's not, that isn't going to fix the problem, because that's not what the problem is. And so then he's going to get this, potentially, I'm making that up, but you can see where it goes, what happens. And so it is always like, so I had an amazing conversation then with my daughter, and we talked about, right, okay, who are we being, who energetically do we show up, who are we being for these people? And it's not, we do sometimes get anxious about things, we do sometimes get nervous, but maybe say that rather than mix messages, and rather I really see that it's that being. And that's exactly what you're saying. People, it's like, I want to fix my daughter, I want to fix my son. And a huge realization I also had was, I really saw that the reason that I wanted to fix my children was because I wanted to feel okay. And it's like, that's not where okayness comes from. You got to do that first. You got to find your okayness within you, because that's the only place they're ever going to find it. If you fix them and believe that fixing them made you feel okay, you're going to give them this message that the world's got to be a certain way so that they can be all right. And you're all headed in the wrong direction then. So.
Oh, wow. That's pretty powerful. That's very powerful. It's interesting how kids, and especially the younger they are, keep us pure, keep us true. It's actually true everywhere, except it's the trouble with adults is when we talk to them, then they know how to be polite, right?
Yeah.
So, right. So they know not to, they've learned not to call us out on something that seems a little bit funny, but kids don't yet, right? So they don't even call us out. They just get the communication energetically.
Yeah.
They don't listen to what's being said. No. They just understand what's true.
Absolutely.
They just understand what is true. It's like, you're disturbed, you're not there. And they just understand that, even through the words of, we're all going to be okay. Everything's all right. It's all going to be fine. But what they hear is the truth of your state.
Yes.
The truth of what you know and realize to be true in that moment. That's what they actually hear. So it's interesting, because when you go back and you were damaged and then you were broken forever, and the most you could hope for is some coping and stuff. And so that was going on, except then this insight where it was like the truth of what you knew was not that. You realized, oh my gosh, that's just not true. You knew it in an instant. This is what I think in the, what's miraculous. It sounds miraculous, because this is where people say, like, yeah, but that can't be. You can't go through stuff like that. Then there's like a process. It's going to take, there's therapy. There's like a whole process. There's some things you're going to need. But in your knowing, in an instant, in an insight, in an instant, but there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you. And that knowing that about your children, like that's just wild, right? And then you're trying to communicate. But I love that. Then the feedback to you in the communication was, no, you've got to really know this. They won't get it unless you really know it. Don't forget about them. You got to be selfish. You can't, you just you need to get your oxygen mask on.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You can't help them. You got to get your oxygen mask on you before you can.
And I think that is, you know, I've worked with a lot of moms, and that is one of the things. And I think also seeing actually taking care of yourself is in this way, in this sense, is the least selfish thing you can do, because you have to lead the way. You have to do that. And it's actually when I've actually called out a few moms and sort of said, you know, you say you unconditionally love your child, but actually when you're not sorting yourself out first, you're actually putting it onto them to be okay so that you can feel okay. And it's like, that is not unconditional love, but we say, I love my child so much, I'm going to save them first. And that is absolute rubbish. It just, you can't. And it's like, that is not how this works. And if you look at that and break it down, what you're saying is, you feel okay so that I can feel okay, please. That's like, you've got to turn that around. No, you have got to go inside and see this for yourself and know where your okayness is. See it, feel it, play with it, do it, and know that. Because there definitely were some hugely rocky times with my children over this, and I can see, like, I really had to stand in my grounding with, this is how it is, because like you say with kids as well, I mean, they were like young adults, but it's still the same. And I think in that relationship, you know, they were going to call me out. They were going to really call me out, because, you know, they're my kids, and so they're really going to call me out. And it was like, there are no exceptions. And I think one of the things, when I came across this and I was looking in this direction, I had a pamphlet of how I needed to breathe, things I needed to say. If this scenario came up, I'd have to do this, and to help my kids in this way. And I mean, you know, I was given this stack of paper after I'd done this. And it was like, if this is just another coping mechanism, I am up to here with that. I can't do that. I can't take on anymore and try and memorize and try and think about, you know, the words that I have to use, and, you know, where the connotations are and what I mean by that. I thought, I can't do it. That's just too much. And so if there is somewhere where this stops, then this isn't what I think it is, and I'm not interested. So I think as well, I was kind of like road testing this. It's like, right, okay, you say it works this way. Here, does it work this way? Here, does it work this way? Here, does it work this way? So my son's doing this. Here, does it work this way? Is it the same? And yeah, for me, I definitely went in and really did that. Really was like, okay, you say I'm okay. And it was almost, I even had this thing for a good few years. I had this thing, and I would just be asking myself the question, am I okay even here? My son actually went through a phase of wanting to take his own life. There was also, he thought he was following in his dad's footsteps over a few things, and he was like, I cannot be an abuser, and I don't know how not to be, and I can't do this. And then it was like, okay, am I okay even here? And it is almost like when you were saying our okayness, our resilience, this thing that we have within us, it never goes anywhere. And it was like continually coming back and going, okay, so you've said it's over there, I'm going to feel over there, can I still feel it? Is okayness still there? It's like, and much to my surprise, I have not found a situation, I have not found a thing, I have not found that the answer to that question, when I've truly asked it and really gone inside, has always been a yes. Okay.
Wow. This is what when people talk about, because oftentimes in this whole realm of trauma and all of that, people will talk about healing. Healing is required, right? And that's what, you know, process and healing is for. But what you're describing is miracle healing, right? Because you're describing what you're describing is a complete restoration to well-being, right? So from a total brokenness, something wrong, far from well-being, to a complete restoration of well-being in an instant, in an insight. Yeah, that's how you're describing and what you're describing. And imagine that's challenging as people as people go. Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes people question that. I know, like I did some work to Women's Refuge for a while, but the way that I worked didn't go down too well for this reason, because to me it makes no sense to, I am very happy when I am talking to somebody to completely trust my wisdom, my intuition, what comes out of my mouth. And there was very many rules about what you're allowed to say and what you're not, and who is the victim and who's the perpetrator and things, and I just don't see it that way. It just doesn't look that way to me, and it doesn't look helpful to, I can see when people are struggling and suffering, I can see what is needed in that moment, but I trust myself to see that. And it's like, if something comes out of my mouth, I'm good with that. That's because I am pointing to truth. And that's what I see. It's like, yes, I have that on my side. I have God on my side, if you like. I'm pointing people to a truth that I know. I've lived it. I know it. I know it is real.
You know, it's this idea, I've heard this idea about how Jesus in his healing was not actually a healing.
No, it's
so... Yeah, and I never thought of that, because I always heard he's healing. He yes. would heal people, but that he never healed anybody.
No.
Because he never saw a brokenness. No. And he never saw a brokenness. And your brokenness that you would show up with couldn't stand in his knowing. This Abraham will often talk about, when two of you come together, the most intense vibration will dominate.
Yes.
And this is an interesting thing. His knowing of your well-being was so unshakable, so without doubt, so sure that you were all is well and you are fine, that even when you showed up in your belief that you had been damaged or there was some problem or any of that, that belief could not handle the strong knowing that he came in with as you would interact with him. So
yeah, I mean, for years, way before I knew anything about Abraham, I saw the strongest energy is always going to win. And I could see, like, when I was in my unhealthy relationship, I was not grounded in anything. And my husband was so grounded in fear. He was so fearful that fearful energy was always the stronger energy. And I had no grounding of anything. And as I was looking in this direction, as I was seeing it, and I heard the words, like in the 3 Principles community, I heard this word of grounding, and it's like, it was around about then that I really saw, the strongest energy is always going to win. And if I am not sure and certain, and you can't pretend, you can't fool the universe, you can't fool. If you don't know this and don't stand, and that again was like walking my talk and learning and seeing this and really playing with this for myself, because it was like, if this is true, it does not matter how hard you hit it. Like you're saying, if what Jesus, the healing that Jesus has done, if that is true, that's how it is. There's nothing, you can't damage that. You can't hit, you can't do anything to it. So it's like, if this is true, it doesn't matter what I do. I can't change this. I can't change truth. I'm not powerful enough to do that. But if I really kind of play with this and really look into this and really go there, then I am going to see that for myself. I'm actually going to know it for myself, which is absolutely what happened. And then it was like, and I think, the people that you love the most, your children, those kinds of things, they definitely try you and push your buttons the most. My daughter would say things, when I'm with clients or things like that, clients will tend to be a bit respectful, or clients will tend to kind of think, oh yeah, Deb must know. But my daughter would be like, no, I saw you do this, it's like, totally call me out. So it's like, I absolutely have to be the strongest energy in this, because the strongest energy will always win. So it is, and truth and love and God, and that is the strongest energy. That's source. That's the one source of all. So if you're,
and that goes back to the why that was so important, that this be about you.
Yeah.
There's no saving anybody. There's no saving. And by the way, and this is so relevant to us, even, in coaching or in the way we might want to be helping others. It's like, save yourself. Because, there's all this trouble and all these problems and all these things that are going on. Gotta go help here. It's like the very fact that there's something occurring to you that seems like a problem. I think you're with your grandchild. It's an interesting thing, right? It's like the very occurring that there may be a problem with him. That's your problem right there.
Yeah.
That's your problem right there. The fact that you do not see that there's no problem with him. Now, you can't see clearly. Right. So that, because you can't see clearly, because if you're seeing a problem, you're not seeing clearly. So that's where it's that, do this work yourself. Do you see that we are whole? Do you see that there's only a source of well-being? Because if you see that for yourself, then you must see that for him. And now when you see it for him, now you're clear-minded. So what's really going on now? Now you're not trying to fix this broken kid, right? That's a very different thing. You're not fixing a broken kid. You're not coming from that place anymore, because now that you know who you are and you know how that there is only well-being flowing through you, that's who that is. That's who that is. They're not broken. Once you see that, now you can be helpful. Now that would be helpful. What do you want to do? How can you, what occurs to you now? Do you want to talk to the teacher? Do you want to talk to the child? What needs to happen next?
And I think that as well, when you come back, because I love, for me, again, another thing with like looking in this direction, this understanding, I'm not interested in something that isn't hugely practical and really helpful. I had 3 children who were struggling, and I needed, I didn't need some airy fairy. I didn't need to sit in a room and be zen. I needed to, cook dinner and pick them up from college or whatever. I needed to pay bills. I needed to work out life works. I needed to work out how I put food on the table and this kind of stuff. So I also, I wanted something that was really practical. And what I see, one of the things that I love about this the most is the answers that we get in that way. The things that occur to us, they are so practical. It's like the words are coming out of my mouth. Just when I had that conversation with my daughter, it sort of came out of the blue. She phoned me and I knew things, I knew there was something going on for her. And then we had this conversation and all this stuff is coming out of my mouth. And then it's like, wow, when you just live this and when you put yourself in that place and you start asking, like I love the asking it is given, when you don't take it all on. One of the things, I used to get terrible headaches and really bad shoulders and bad back, and I had a lot of pain, and what I see is that was me trying to carry everything. And the minute I feel my shoulders the tiniest little bit, like whoa, God's business, that's not, I'm trying to carry something on my shoulders that just is not mine to carry. And it's like, yeah, forget that. I'm never doing that again. It's like, we are so loved, we are so looked after, we are so taken care of. And then we kind of think, well, it's up to me, I need to take this on my shoulders, and we feel it and it hurts. And again, that is that hot and cold game. You're going in the wrong direction. This does not.
And how soon do you feel it? And that, I think the physical body is so great, because that, there's all these things that say the body never lies. And so, because the physical body is great, because first what happens, if you look the wrong way, like there's not a wrong way, but if you look in a way that's not healthy or useful, in other words, you're trying to raise children and you need money and you've got to like get them a place and all of that. And now you turn in the direction of, but I'm not good for anything. How would I ever make any money? That's not a good place to be looking. Right? So, but when you turn innocently, it's a thought. You just came out of this marriage. I'm sure you had some messages to say that you're not any good and not worth anything. And so when you look, because that familiar thought is there, and you just kind of look because it comes up, you give it a bit of attention, you'll feel it right away. You'll feel it right away. This is what's that hot, cold game, is that's what our inherent well-being does. So now you look over there, is like, yeah, but I don't have any skill. And as you look at that thought, you'll feel it. But this is what I love about Abraham Hicks in the teaching. Says the feeling of it begins subtly.
Yeah.
It's subtle. Did you know? Yeah. Did you notice you were kind of living, just doing your thing, and you had this thought like, hey, I should get a job, and then, we could have more things around here, and we could whatever. And it's like, yeah, but I don't have any skills, right? So now you look over there, and the minute you look over there, that's not great. Like something about it's not great. But Abraham says, but you don't really pick up on it. You don't really pick up on it. Like you don't notice something just changed. And Abraham says, oh, don't worry, it'll get worse. You looked over there, and over there is not helpful, and you didn't notice. And Abraham says, oh, don't worry, it'll get worse. Because now you're looking over there and you go, yeah, I don't have any skill. I mean, if I don't get any money soon, they could kick us out onto the street. Well, that's worse. That's a pretty worse feeling, right? Like that's worse. But you know what? I think I'm being responsible.
That one. Now.
No, I'm just being responsible. Yeah, I'm not, I'm just being responsible. I'm looking at all the things that could go on.
Irresponsible not to look in that direction.
Right? I really should be responsible. Like this is it's a possibility it could happen. I really should look over there, right? And it's like, oh, you don't seem to understand that you create your reality. You move in the direction of your looking. You don't seem to understand that because you're looking in a direction of where you wouldn't have the money, and because you don't have the skills, and you wouldn't have the money, and you'd be out on the street. This is using your imagination. This is using the power of your own thought against yourself. You don't seem to notice. You call this responsible, right? Let me spend time and attention with this very intelligent thought of this out on the street and what our life would be like that. And Abraham says, so now that's worse, right? Do you feel it yet? And Abraham says, because if you don't notice, don't worry, it'll get worse, right? It'll get worse. So it'll get worse. And pretty soon I'm worried, and pretty soon I can't sleep. And pretty soon I have anxiety, right? Because I didn't notice. And pretty soon my back hurts. Here's what's powerful about the body. See, I didn't notice my feeling dropped, and I didn't really notice I worried. And in fact, I said it's just me being responsible. And then I didn't really notice anxiety, and I thought that was whatever. But now my back hurts. My back hurts, and it's kind of like, do you notice it yet? Because now it's manifest physically, right? It's now physically manifest. Can you notice it yet? Because this physical body is like, because you'll keep feeling this, because your thoughts might wander, but this physical manifestation, that will stay and tell you the truth, right? That one you can't not notice, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and exactly that. And then to me, the game, if you like, when we begin to understand this and look in this direction, then there's a discernment there, isn't there? Then it's like, okay, how soon can I notice? Does it have to get to the point when I've got backache and my shoulders hurt, or I feel this? It's kind of, do I have to let it go that far, or can I see it sooner than that? Can I pitch and see?
I love your realization that if this is what I've been creating, or this reality creating of despair or fear, or I'm powerless or whatever it was before, then you saw the other side, that this is the way it works for a great life as it works for a terrible life. I mean, it's the same, it's the same creation. And what happened? So then following that insight, there was that insight. And what happened with that part around the creating of a life as a person who is well and not broken and not traumatized and healing and not having to be broken the rest of your life? Like, so then what happened with that part?
Oh my gosh. We just started to have a real lot of fun with that. I really can see, and a lot is hindsight now looking back, but I just set out to recreate my family, to recreate my one daughter. I had virtually, it's actually my daughter with my grandchildren, we just had virtually no relationship at all. And when we were doing some counseling, one of the questions that the counselors used to ask her was to recall the worst thing that had happened to her in her childhood, and then to explain to me how she felt about that and the part that I played in it. So that destroyed any last remnants of any kind of decent relationship we had. And then it was like, right, okay.
I just want to pause for a second, because to you and I, from our understanding, the ridiculousness of what you just said is apparent. But I just want to pause about it, because I think sometimes in this understanding, we just kind of take it for granted. But what you just described is the common way of dealing with things. What often happens, and not in all cases, but it's a therapy that says something bad happened to you, and unless you go back there, unless you go back into it, you need to recall the worst thing. And how did you feel? And now go ahead and tell your mother and whatever it was, and like, go ahead. Like, this is healing.
Yeah. And the idea behind that was then I had to apologize to her for causing her to feel this way. And so she would have to find some moment where she felt let down. She felt I hadn't protected her. She felt something like that. So she would, be helped to spend some time looking in that direction. And then she would have to tell me about it. And then I would have to apologize. That was kind of, and I can tell you, we would go into those sessions and we would kind of be okay. And we would come out of those sessions. It was awful. It was just, I don't even know how we got back in the car together to go home some days. It was so bad when we came out of those sessions. And I could see there's no part of me that those people would genuinely thought they were helping us. They genuinely thought they were doing some good, and I have no bad feeling towards that. But exactly, seeing the understanding of this and seeing now and what's possible and what has happened in my family, what we are like now as a family, and how much love and how close we are, and how close I am with my grandchildren, and how proud I am of my son and what he's doing, and what we do as a family. But it just makes no sense when exactly the thing that you were describing before, when we say, you create the reality that you look at, you create when you look in that direction and you talk about it, and you're creating. We're powerful creators in that sense, when we're doing that. So we're in the sessions and we're recreating this terrible, terrible feeling. And then it's kind of sort of trying to go out and live a happy life from this terrible, terrible feeling going back. And I can see, I mean, it's rare that we even talk about anything now, but I can even see that I could talk myself into a bad feeling if I wanted to about the past. If I really wanted to, I could probably talk myself into a bad feeling. But it's like seeing what we actually do, what we have lots of conversations about. I mean, my daughter is a published author. She writes psychological thrillers, and she's flipping brilliant at it. And she came to me and she said she'd started writing, she wanted to do this, and I'm like, right, okay, let's create that. What is it you want? And she said, I want to be a published author. She said, I don't want to self-publish, I want a publisher for my first book. And I'm like, okay, let's do it. And then she went on a couple of book groups, and the book groups were sort of saying that doesn't happen. A brand new author she's never written anything before. This is a completely new thing. And they said, never written before, never done anything. It is really, really, really unlikely that she'll get a published author. And I'm like, okay, you have seen what we have done. You were damaged forever. You're not damaged. Listen to me, don't listen to them. It's kind of like, what do you want to do? And it's kind of like, what's the worst that can happen? Let's pretend it's possible and as if it's possible, and live as if it's possible, and see what happens. And I said, worst case scenario, you'll self-publish a few years down the line. Best case scenario, well, she just, about 2 weeks ago, she just had her first paycheck from her. She's been completely, like, all of it's been, and she just had her first rather large paycheck from her publishers. She published her first book, and she's writing more books. She's been commissioned to write more books.
Oh, wow.
So, you know, and that's
just
the kind
like
of game
that.
Yeah.
Well, so such a difference. What a story and what a contrast about a talking and thinking and a focus on, I'd love to be a published author. No, not self-published. I mean, published author. And, you know, and to have that contract, and then to be hearing, but that doesn't happen because you're the first one and you're, you know, like that. And then it's kind of like, okay, well, that's not helpful. I'm tuning them out.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? And it's like, I'm tuning them out because they don't know, and they don't create my reality. I create my reality. The reality I live in is the reality that I'm creating in my own thinking.
Yep.
And so somehow you got her to tune that out, and you engaged with her in a created reality, in a different kind of reality. And so just like that, miraculously, what's impossible became possible. She's already published and yeah. Well, and see, so that's happening. That's happening. The thing is that thought is creating, not tomorrow. Thought is creating in this moment, and in this moment, and in this moment. So the question is, when you're having that conversation with her, is in this moment she's a published author? Is in this moment she's a published author? Well, but she doesn't have a contract from it. That's not the question. The question is, in this moment, is she a published author? Because the manifested world needs to catch up. I mean, you know, contracts have to be signed and things like that, but all of that will follow this moment, because this moment continues to manifest. Meanwhile, you go to therapy. Let's take the power of this moment. Let's take the power of this moment. Thank you for giving us the time. We're now together for an hour in therapy. We will take the power of this moment and the power of your mind, and let's direct it. Here's what I'd like you to do is think about the most horrible thing that ever happened to you and how you felt at the time. I want you to go back into the fear you felt. What were the thoughts you were thinking, right? You are creating your own reality, but it doesn't happen in the future or in the past. It's happening right now. It's happening right now. You are becoming that right in this moment. Isn't that interesting? And so that's why it's kind of like, I know we kind of like mentioned it and then moved on, but I was like, yeah, to you and I, that seems ridiculous, because it is ridiculous from a realization of your very being is right now in this moment. Whatever happened to you is not happening in this moment. When you are invited back to think about and to go back into the thinking and into the feeling, how does this make any sense?
And even when you look at that from the sense of creation as well, I know one of the things that I struggled with for a while is this, again, like you're saying, bring it into this moment. And a game that we played a lot, me and my daughter, we would talk about what was it going to feel like? You know, what would you feel like? I'm sitting here and, you know, you're a published author and I'm the mum of the most famous author in England, you know, and we're playing this game and getting into the feeling of it. And I know, again, that whole, it's irresponsible not to go back into the past and heal. And it's irresponsible to play a silly game about pretending to be an author. If you want to be an author, there's things you have to do. And it's not, you know, play games about what it's going to feel like. But what I see around creation and what I've seen, you know, even within my family and things like that, I would imagine what it was going to be like when me and my daughter were really, really close. when it looked like we were never going to speak again, I would have imagined conversations about how we would come back together and how that would work itself out and who we would be when that would happen. And it is. And then you see, life catches up with that when you do that. But I know initially at first, it was very much that whole, this looks like how life works. So go back into the past and think about that. And you're just being stupid, imagining this rosy future that just doesn't exist.
I love what you just said, because let's be really clear that the way it works is the feeling of this moment manifesting into the experiences that are matching this feeling.
Yeah.
So from my worry, I begin to have more to be worried about, and I begin to see it, right? And you tried this where it's like, it came to you as this realization is, if this is what you want and this is what you desire, then let's talk about that. If what you want is to be a published author, if what you want is whatever, then let's start talking and thinking about that. And it's interesting. And like, how will you feel? And what will that be like? What will it be for me to be the mom of one, right? So we could say, this is an interesting thing. I'd never thought about it like this, but we could say, oh, you guys are like pretending.
Yeah.
Interesting, but it's okay. Let's like, look at this. Oh, you guys were pretending. You're pretending. Like you're pretending in this moment, like you're pretending like that. And the therapist was inviting you to do the same thing.
Yeah.
This is what we don't see. The therapist was taking you in this present moment and said, let's pretend, shall we? I'd like you to remember the most horrible time at the greatest fear. And I'd like you to pretend that right now, because you have to pretend it. The reason you have to pretend that is because it is not happening right now.
Yeah.
For you to feel it, you must pretend that it is happening right now. Use your imagination, go back into your memory, feel it entirely right now. And then if what I said a moment ago, we say that this energy and this feeling right now will manifest into my experience and my reality right now. Interesting.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Because that was exactly what would happen. We would come out of there feeling like something bad was happening, or we would feel like we literally just experienced that again. And when we had those amazing conversations, it was often like I go out a lot my daughter, and we go out with the children, and we would have these conversations about what it was going to be like, and what would it be like if we walked past a bookshop and Laura's book is in the bookshop window, or if we did this, and it's like that. And we would kind of get there, and we would be like giggling about this whole being this amazing author. And I'd say, we might have to be careful because somebody might recognize you, you're so famous now. And that was what it would feel like. And exactly it is. It's sort of seeing, on the one hand, that you could say, you're playing pretend, you're being ridiculous, but you actually see, the outside has to begin to reflect when you feel that way, when you move into that. And I've seen it happen too often to doubt that's, and okay, it's not always the exact thing, but it is, you see, it's that feeling. It manifests into something in form that matches. So it's always something beautiful when you're doing that, when you play in that direction. It's always something really, really lovely.
Wow. I love that, sort of how this has come together from that realization, and that how just as these horrors are created and this experience is created, is as exactly the same way as these experiences are created. It doesn't work in a different way. The creation is all happening in the same way. And our realization is that insight of, oh, wow, it's all happening over here according to my thought, because it isn't happening then, and it isn't happening when. The creation isn't happening then, and it isn't happening when. It's actually happening right now. It's happening. My experience, my life, it's happening right now, and it's happening in my thought, according to my thought. And so it's so incredible. So what a wonderful place to sort of add to the story that we started on that first conversation.
One of the things that really, I know it sounds a little bit crazy, but in one way, like when people come to me and they say they've got anxiety or they've got a terrible relationship, or in one sense, I'm actually quite excited, because it's like, well, you've created that. So that tells me that you work perfectly, because if you didn't work, you wouldn't have been able to do that. So you're an amazing creator. You work. This works. Fantastic. Okay. So now let's just fine tune it and make it work a way that you would like it to work, not a way that it, is against you, but you work. So to me, when somebody sort of says they're struggling with something, with anything, anxiety or any of those things, I'm actually inside, I'm kind of like, yes, because it's like, you can do this then. Brilliant.
It's kind of like, and the more intense it is, the like, boy, you're really good at this too.
Really great at this, yeah.
Right? Like, you're really good at this. So are you like not sleeping nights? Are you like waking? You're really, really good at this, right?
Yeah.
Because
I mean, I was a fantastic creator.
Yeah. Well, because it's just obvious in sort of the hindsight. So wait a minute. So this happened to me. I remember I had this experience of being let go from a job. There was a downsizing that was huge. And so my role got impacted and all of that. So I get home and I'm like, oh my God, why me though? How did I get selected in this round and whatever? It's like, never mind that this organization went from 100,000 employees globally to 30,000 eventually, and then eventual bankruptcy, right? But doesn't matter. So when it hit me, it was like, oh my gosh, and why did it hit me? Maybe I'm no good. Yeah. That was a great thought. That was a great thought. So then I'm like, so the thought came and I'm like, maybe I'm no good. Maybe that's, but I got the job and they hired me and everything before. And it's like, yeah, but maybe you're not actually good. You're not actually, maybe you don't really have the skill like you think you do. It's like, oh, wow. So that thought, then it was like, and if that's true, then you might not get another job. Right? That was another thing, right? And then so pretty soon it became this, I mean, we could lose the house. We could like lose it all. How are we going to survive? We'd be out on the streets. We might have to sell the kids. It was like,
a great idea.
Yeah. So your mind kind of goes and goes and goes. And see, but the thing is, but I'm in this moment, I was able to create a full 360-degree reality in this moment, literally to be able to live in that sort of anxiety and worry. By the way, how effective do you think that state was in a job interview?
Yeah.
How, for say networking, like, hey, for opportunities for different, coming from that state of that imagined sort of thinking, how effective do you think that was? And sort of coming across like someone you would really want in your organization. It's interesting, isn't it? So this state is creating my future, really creating my future, not just my feeling. It's not just my feeling right now. It's literally creating the jobs that I would be offered or not offered. People think this is like pretending. People think it's like you're pretending you're feeling something. That's just the beginning of creation. You're pretending you're thinking, you're feeling. That is the birth of creation. It manifests in the job you don't get or you do get. It manifests in the opportunities coming to you or not coming to you. You create your own reality, and it is not just in this experience. It is literally in a physical experience that you will live inside of, right? We're not just pretending. It's literally you'll live inside of that, like your daughter with the checks and a published author.
Yep. Exactly.
That's not pretending. That's not pretend.
No, it's real, and it wasn't that long ago when those conversations were complete. She hadn't heard from this particular publisher, and even the story of how that happened, it's amazing. But it absolutely comes from understanding and seeing this and allowing yourself. I think we have this idea of not allowing ourselves to feel good, to really, really feel good. So
And most of us think it's fine to allow ourselves to worry and be concerned about things. This is what's crazy. You're making it up in all directions because it's not happening. My thing, I was making it up. There was no homeless and lose every, like there was none of that. It had to be imagined by me.
Yeah.
I needed to imagine it. I needed to think about it and consider it and continue to think about it. It's just incredible, right? But that was responsible because, see, that's responsible because that could happen. I need to prepare. I got to think about it. Well, you are preparing, you are thinking, you are preparing for a future you do not want to create.
That's the madness.
How does this make any sense?
It just zero sense. And that's why people have so many money worries, so many relationship worries, so many health worries. And you see it time and time again, don't you?
And then they'll say, but I'm not crazy. I'm not crazy because I do have a lot to worry about. We say, but of course you do. I just said, this isn't just pretend. When we say you create your reality, it's not a pretend. I really do have money worries. I really do have things. Of course you do. Because if you pretend long enough by worrying, by all of that, it's not that you create an experience that doesn't feel good. It is a manifested experience. You live inside of it, really live inside of it, like a published book.
Yeah.
Like checks coming in the mail. So this isn't like it just works in a feeling. It works manifested. It is truly creation.
And that has been my experience both ways with like creating. I was a skilled creator at terrible things, and now I'm a skilled creator at beautiful things.
What a beautiful way to complete the conversation.
Oh,
I
God,
love
I had the best time.
That's the line right there. Wow.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. If anybody has not listened to that first video, just kind of go back and listen to that one. Thank you so much. This has been great. Continuing on in our conversation. Thank you, Debra.
Thank you.